everybody have something that kind of looks like this in front of them?
Yes.
Perfect. So there is a subdirectory in there called nyc2000, and we're going to add nyc2000.shp by highlighting it and hitting add. Raise your hand if you have successfully accomplished this task. Well done. Well done. And if you need assistance, we have two really overqualified helpers walking around, Anna over there and Jeff behind her.
And cartography.
Okay, so thematic maps. This is really powerful. So the first thing I want to show you, for you guys who are less experienced with GIS, I want to right-click where it says NYC2000. Again, right-click over here. And I want to look at the attribute table. So this giant spreadsheet is a database associated with that polygonal geography of New York City. So each one of these rows is corresponding statistics about a certain place in New York City, but this is not just a spreadsheet, it's tied to the geography of New York. So if I select any of these rows, and you can tell there's 2,218 rows in this data set, if I select any of them or a set of them, I can right click and say zoom to selected, for example. Where is that? It's under the selection. So these are the 4 polygons I've highlighted in my data. I can use this identification tool to click on any of these polygons, and it will reveal all of the census data from 2000. So at this point I should probably tell you this weird shapefile of New York City we're looking at is from the United States Census 2000, a bunch of demographic information about the city of New York. And so we're going to explore this data, we're going to make several maps, and we're going to learn the basic concepts of thematic mapping through the lens of New York City. So if you've selected anything, go to Selection and Clear Selected Features. That will unselect everything. And then right-click again on NYC2000, and we will say Zoom to Layer. So we should all be back out here. Okay, so I thought it would be a good idea. Not many of you are going to be interested in New York City, but pretend. I know Kelly's interested in Russia and parts of Central Europe, Central Asia. Obviously the concepts we're going to learn here apply to anything from public health to humanities. But we're going to make a series of thematic maps, and our theme is going to be education, poverty, and unemployment in New York City. And we're going to create a map layout using 3 or 4 thematic maps that summarizes the situation on the ground in New York City in terms of education, poverty, and unemployment through thematic mapping. So that's what we're going to do this afternoon. So we'll just start exploring the data. So the first thing I want you to do is right-click on NYC2000 and go all the way down to the bottom of the menu where it says Properties. And we're going to do this a lot in the next couple hours. So this Properties choice on the menu, we're going to be hitting that a lot. So right-click on NYC2000 all the way down to Properties. And it'll open up this Layer Properties dialog box. And when we're talking about thematic mapping in ArcGIS, we're almost always talking about the Symbology tab within the Layer Properties. And this is where the magic happens. This is where we can quickly visualize large amounts of geographic information. So I've clicked on my Symbology tab, I'm sorry, and this first pull-down option here where it says Value, that's populated by all the columns in that spreadsheet we just looked at. And in our case, we're looking at census data from 2000. All those columns are things like number of human beings, percentage of Hispanic, percentage of Asian, percent unemployed, stuff like that. So we're going to quickly make some thematic maps. So let's first scroll through this pull-down menu and just see that there's about 20 or 30 columns that we could map right away. Does everybody see that? These are all columns that could be their map. And one of the things you learn as a GIS person is that you have to start to think like a robot to understand. These are what we call attributes. And they are made for robots to understand them, and we're not robots. But you have to learn how to decipher these column headings, because these are essentially the headings of all of the attributes we can map from the census. So let's just pick one and see if anybody can figure out what it means. Let's look at the one I have highlighted on my screen. So that says T0P or TOP underscore COLL. What do you guys think that is?
College education.
Right. So that is the total percent of the population with a college degree. All right? So I don't know anything about New York geography, but I bet that's higher in parts of Manhattan and lower in parts of the Bronx or Queens. But the GIS knows that much better than I do. So I'm going to click on that. And automatically what appears here is a future map legend. These are units that are pulled right from that spreadsheet, those columns, that attribute, starting with 0.00 to 12.55. And these are default classification values for percentage of people in college. For brevity's sake, I'm just going to hit OK. And I'm going to be looking at a map right away. Does everybody see that on their screen? Yes? How many people don't see that on their screen? Okay. Okay, so does anybody know what kind of map this is? We've all seen maps like this. Does anybody know what type of map this is called? Yeah.
It's a Choropleth map.
Choropleth map.
But what are the spatial units?
These are census tracts.
Tracts.
Or block groups, I forget which. I was confused the two. I think they're block groups now I think about it.
What did you call it? Chloro what?
So it's Choropleth, which is Latin for place and value. It's the only Latin I know. Most undergrads want to say chloropeth or chloropeth. And I'm just introducing that to mess with your heads, because now you'll not know how to say it. No, but it's Choropleth, Choropleth. Pleth is value, I think. Right? Like plethora?
Yeah. Coro is area.
Yeah. Area and value.
Yeah. Areas.
Is that right?
Yeah. And chloro is actually not even.
Isn't chlorophyll something? I'm not here to teach you guys any kinds of words. I probably know the fewest words of anybody in the room. Let's keep it to mapping while I'm talking. So yeah, Choropleth map. One of the most popular devices for visualizing geographic information is the Choropleth map. So what is happening here is the actual aerial unit, and I know you guys want to play with this, but just follow me because we're gonna learn some stuff along the way. Basically, the aerial unit becomes the symbol, the shade. This is what we call a sequential color scheme that ramps up the darkness as the attribute value ramps up in quantity. So the golden rule of thematic cartography then is to build a visual structure that corresponds with either the numerical or qualitative structure of the phenomenon we're mapping. So we're building this congruence, this visual structure in this visual artifact to mimic the way the nature of the phenomenon changes. In this case, we have what in statistics is called a unipolar directional statistic that goes from 0 to 100. And so we're mimicking that with a color scheme that goes from light to dark. If instead of percentage of college educated in New York, this were different language families in India, it would be inappropriate to use a sequential color scheme like this. We would want to use different hues as opposed to different values within one hue. So if this were language family, we might do yellow, green, red, blue. But since it's a quantitative statistic, we want to mimic that by having a quantitative or a hierarchical structure in our map legend. All right, so there's a certain grammar associated with thematic mapping, which, more than you want to know, sort of pairs what we call in graphic design and information design the visual variables with the nature of the mapped phenomenon's changes. And we'll get into that as we talk about other types of